20 years of growing up side by side, and it took only one glance at her scarlet gown to erase everything. I was Julian's first love, the girl he once promised under the ginkgo trees that he would marry. We met when we were nothing, fell in love in the quiet hours between dawn and dusk, and everyone said we were made for each other. Then Scarlet crashed into our world, loud and dazzling, racing, nightclubs, cliff-edge thrills, dragging Julian through every reckless thing I'd begged him to avoid. And me? I stayed in plain linen, surrounded by brittle scrolls and forgotten promises, turning into the faded dream he no longer visited. He started coming home late, smelling of perfume I didn't wear, his camera roll full of pictures I was afraid to open. He said, "She's just Grandpa's friend's granddaughter. You're overthinking it. Aren't things fine the way they are?" I found a stack of Speedway stubs at the back of his drawer, every ticket had with Scarlet scribbled on the reverse. I watched him abandon our anniversary dinner to chase her next race. Even a white moon, left too long in sunlight, yellows and cracks. When Julian finally noticed the distance, his eyes were bloodshot. "You promised you'd wait forever. This time, I'm done waiting. Some people are only ever passing through your youth." I turned and ran toward the one who had always waited in the shadows. I curled on the living room sofa and watched the room fade from black to pallid dawn. It was the third night Julian hadn't come home. The last message on my phone was the one I'd sent the evening before. "Tomorrow is my parents' death anniversary, please come home early." Outside, Eastbrook's rain had whispered all night, just like the pre-dawn 3 years ago when the call about the pile-up came. I was 20 then, and Julian carried me through the grief. His own eyes red, he swore, "Serena, I'll stand beside you every year from now on." He broke that promise tonight. He didn't even pick up the phone. "Miss Vance, breakfast is ready." Mrs. King's voice drifted from behind the door, soft and tentative. "Shall we wait a little longer for Mr. Hawthorne?" "No need." I fastened the pearl studs in front of the mirror, my mother's last gift. Probably an emergency at the office. I knew it wasn't. I'd called him 7 times last night, every ring dissolved into nothing. At 3 a.m. I'd scrolled into Scarlett's new post, a blurred nightscape captioned, "Rain is better when someone's watching it with you." In the corner, a sliver of a familiar watch face. Julian's. At the gates of Riverside, the old flower seller recognized me and pressed a bundle of white roses into my hands. "Alone this year?" She caught herself and added quickly, "That tall young man always came before." I managed a smile and took the flowers. As I turned, a black umbrella cut across my vision. Serena. Adrian stood there, white roses in his hand. My mother's favorite bloom. Adrian? I stared. Why was he here? He didn't explain. He simply stepped closer, tilting the umbrella until it settled over me like a roof. From that distance I caught the faint scent of agarwood on his skin, cool against the rain. "Let's go in together." He spoke quietly. At my parents' headstone he stayed 3 paces back while I knelt to wipe the rain from their photograph. Tears slipped before I could stop them. A coat still warm from his body settled on my shoulders. Only then did I notice how red my knuckles had turned. "Jamie," I whispered. He said nothing, only stood behind me, blocking the wind. Snow thickened on the drive back. Adrian's car eased out of the cemetery gates. The heater blasted, yet my fingertips stayed numb. Julian and I had been childhood shadows to each other. The Hawthorne estate and the Vance house were divided only by a low wall laced with climbing roses. When we were 5 he scrambled over, tumbled into our garden and crushed the inkwash lotus I'd just finished. The next day he stole his grandfather's precious Chi Baisher album to apologize. We shared a kindergarten, he hid his nap-time milk so he could give me both cartons. Same elementary school, he punched the boy who mocked my glasses until he cried. Same middle school, he fished every love letter out of my desk and tossed them. At the high school opening ceremony he gave the student address. After the scripted speech he leaned into the mic and added, "Serena, I love you." The principal almost fainted, his grandfather made him kneel all night in the family chapel. The following day I found 99 origami roses in my desk, each heart scrawled with "love you." College finally split us. He studied finance, I studied rare book conservation. Every Friday he crossed Eastburg to reach me, clutching still warm osmanthus cakes. Once a sudden cloudburst soaked him through, but the little box he pulled from inside his jacket was dry, still hot. On my 20th birthday he led me to the weed played in as kids. Leaves whirled like pale coins as he dropped to one knee and lifted a ring forged from his grandmother's antique lock. "I melted her dowry, if you say no I'm dead meat tonight." That winter I lost my parents. I was in the library mending a Qing Dynasty poetry collection when my phone vibrated 17 silent times inside my bag. Julian kicked the door open, frost clung to his lashes, his lips blue, the phone he clenched warped from his grip. "Serena," he rasped, "Uncle Hawthorne and Aunt Eleanor, accident." Heavy snow had caused a chain collision on the interstate. I reached the hospital in time for goodbye. My knees buckled in the corridor, Julian caught me. "Serena, cry if you need to." For 3 days he never left my side. At the funeral he knelt behind me, shielding me from the cutting draft. "Serena, every year from now on, I'll be here with you." I slid off the promise ring, inside the band Julian had etched together, "every year." I set it on the key hook by the door, the same hook where he'd once forced his house key into my hand. "From now on you hold a key to my place too." Back then he'd grinned, eyes holding only me. I wheeled my suitcase to the threshold, my phone lit and dimmed. In the WhatsApp draft I typed and erased until only one line remained. "Julian, we're done." The lock clicked open as my finger hovered over send. Julian stood on the mat, night chill clinging to his coat. Scarlet peered around his shoulder, scarlet lips curving sweetly. "Serena, heading out so late?" Her fingers curled around his sleeve. Julian frowned at the suitcase and reached for it. "Serena, what are you doing?" I stepped aside, his knuckles brushed my cuff, leaving a ghost of Scarlet's perfume. "Move." Scarlet gave a little gasp, as if noticing the suitcase only now, and tugged Julian's arm with wide-eyed innocence. "Julian, it's my fault. I made you watch the sunrise on the ridge last night, no wonder Serena's upset." Her voice was sticky sweet, but her eyes challenged mine. Julian raked his fingers through his hair, irritation crackling in every syllable. "Serena, don't read into it. She's just a little sister to me." I looked at him and asked softly, "Julian, do you remember what today is?" He froze, pupils pinpointing, face draining to chalk. The next second he seized my wrist, voice shaking. "Serena." I shoved hard, he only locked me against him, arms steel tight, as though I might vanish. "I'm sorry, Serena, God, I'm such an idiot." His voice broke, hot tears splashed the hollow of my throat. "I shouldn't have forgotten. I shouldn't." Scarlet's smile froze where she stood. "Julian." She reached for his sleeve. Without turning he flung the word like a blade, "Get out." Scarlet went white, lips parted in disbelief. "Now." Don't make me say it twice. She bit her lip, snatched her bag, and stumbled out on stilettos. When the door clicked shut, only the two of us remained. Julian still clung to me like a drowning man to driftwood. Serena, don't leave. His voice was raw. Please. I closed my eyes, tears slipped silently down. That day, I didn't walk away. He wept and begged and apologized over and over. But I knew, some cracks can never be mended. That night I lay in bed, listening to Julian breathe beyond the bedroom wall. My mind drifted to 6 months ago, the week Scarlett had first arrived at Hawthorne, how openly he despised her. Noise pollution, he'd snapped, hurling his headphones onto the couch. Blasting rock at dawn, does she have any manners? Staying out all night with a bunch of lowlife club rats. He'd tossed her handbag onto the porch in contempt. Hawthorne isn't a shelter. What does Grandpa expect me to babysit? Disgust had filled his eyes then. When had the shift begun? Half a month earlier, the first night he came home late. 2 a.m., the smell of gasoline clung to him, the skin over his knuckles was scraped raw. Took Scarlett to the speedway, he'd said casually, but excitement glittered beneath the words. My heart lurched. In college, Julian had lived for racing, until one crash snapped the guardrail and nearly cost him a leg. Lying in that hospital bed he'd promised, clutching my hand, Serena, I swear I'm done with it. Now he shrugged, almost amused. She begged to try it out, Grandpa told me to keep an eye on her. He ruffled my hair. I wasn't behind the wheel. I nodded and asked nothing more. After that, keeping an eye on Scarlett became his routine. Speedway, nightclubs, dive bars. He always had the same excuse, Grandpa's orders. Yet her missed calls began lighting up his phone. A perfume that wasn't mine drifted from his sweaters. His smiles were no longer mine alone. I shut my eyes, 1,000 fine needles pricked my heart, dull, steady, impossible to ignore. Life suddenly turned eerily calm. Julian stopped slipping out at midnight, Scarlett's name no longer flashed on his screen. He came home on time, sometimes even bringing the white roses I love, arranging them in the dining room vase. I told myself he'd come to his senses. After all, I couldn't simply abandon us. The Julian before 23 had been too good to me. So good I believed I would never love anyone else. He'd scale the garden wall during the first snowfall just to leave a copper ginkgo leaf on my windowsill. He'd memorized Tagore's Stray Birds overnight because I'd once quoted a line. Every birthday he handwrote me a love letter, even though we saw each other daily, folding each sheet into a ginkgo shape and hiding it in my textbook. So when he began acting like that old Julian again, I let myself float in the fragile peace. He threw me an extravagant birthday gala. Beneath crystal chandeliers he toasted the room, arms circling my waist, voice gentle, to my Serena, happy birthday. Wearing the gown he'd chosen, the necklace he'd clasped around my throat, I drifted through well wishes, almost believing we were healing. But when our solo dance began, Julian had vanished. Whispers rippled through the hall. Don't tell me he ran off with that Scarlett girl again. Someone spotted them at the track last week. Birthday jilted, how tragic. I stood nailed to the parquet, nails digging crescents into my palms, smile soldered in place. May I have this dance, Miss Vance? A steady voice sounded behind me. Adrian appeared, inclining slightly, palm extended. His hand was warm, reassuring, maintaining perfect, courteous distance. Julian never returned for the rest of the evening. On the terrace the night wind bit. Maybe it's time I let go? I asked Adrian. He hesitated. The Julian you knew at 23, he said at last, would he ever have left you alone on your birthday? My throat closed. Yes, 23-year-old Julian would race through rain to buy brown sugar for my cramps. Drive half around Eastbrook because I'd casually mentioned craving pastries from the west side. Appear at every birthday midnight with that goofy grin and a gift planned for months. Tonight he'd abandoned me for someone else. Adrian sighed, draping his coat over my shoulders. Serena, some people are only meant to walk part of the road with you. I closed my eyes, tears finally fell. Giving up is agonizing. But clinging to something spoiled is even worse. On the drive home, Adrian took a call from Theodore. The car was silent, the old man's words rang clear. Come to St. Mary's, now. Scarlett crashed. Adrian's brows snapped together, he glanced at me. I went cold, understanding at last. Julian had slipped away mid-banquet because Scarlett had wrecked on the track. We reached the ICU to find the Hawthorne clan massed outside. Theodore sat on a bench, face grave. Julian's parents murmured, eyes flicking from the glass-paneled room to me. Through the window I saw Julian hunched at the bedside, fists clamped around Scarlett's hand. His voice was shredded. Scarlett, open your eyes, please. You can't leave me. I haven't told you. The first time I saw you, red dress, that flash of a smile, I forgot how to breathe. His fingertips brushed her ashen cheek, tears rained onto her skin. Every elder of Hawthorne turned toward me. Theodore's gaze carried the weight of a family's apology. Mrs. Hawthorne's gaze carried pity. Everyone else, every uncle, every great-uncle, was staring at me in silent accusation. See? He never loved you. Have the grace to walk away. I stood frozen, fingertips like ice. So he remembered everything after all. He remembered the color of Scarlett's dress, the way she'd looked back and smiled, the exact instant his heart had lurched for her. But he had forgotten. Forgotten that today was my birthday, forgotten the promise he'd once made Scarlett that he would never let me spend it alone, forgotten that for 20 years, whenever he'd looked at me, the same light had burned in his eyes. Without a flicker of expression, Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between me and the rest of the Hawthorns. Theodore exhaled, voice heavy. Serena, Julian. I shook my head and quietly cut him off. Theodore, you don't have to explain. I understand. My voice was soft, yet it carried to every corner. I turned toward the hospital room. Julian was still on his knees beside the bed, forehead pressed to Scarlett's hand like a penitent praying to his God to wake. Some people are destined to be nothing more than passing guests in your life. Ready to go home? Adrian asked in a low voice. I nodded and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Julian's choked sob drifted through the door. Scarlett, don't leave me. The instant the elevator doors began to slide shut, I whispered, goodbye, Julian. Julian and I called off the engagement. I left the ginkgo leaf ring on the coffee table in the canal-side cottage, the red engagement paper our families had exchanged tucked beneath it. Theodore sat in his carved armchair, puffing his pipe in silence, then finally sighed. Serena, the Hawthorns have wronged you. I shook my head, bowed deeply, and walked out. I was going back to Willowmere. After my parents died, I had rarely returned. Grandpa still lived in the old Suzhou house, guarding his tiny courtyard of white camellias, brewing tea, listening to the rain, writing calligraphy day after day. Most important of all, there was no Julian, no Scarlett, no memories that smothered me. When the train sliced through the river town mist, I dreamed. I dreamed of 18-year-old Julian kneeling in the family chapel, proposing in front of every elder. He'd said, "Serena, after we're married we'll move to Willowmere and plant flowers with your grandpa." I woke to rain-soft Willowmere outside the window. Grandpa's house, white walls, black tiles, a crooked stream at the gate. As a child I'd copy book characters here. Grandma used to say my strokes carried Grandpa's steel. "You're home," Grandpa greeted me on the stone bridge, a celadone oil lamp in his hand. "Your grandmother has heated osmanthus wine, waiting for you to tap the jar." I hadn't expected Adrian to follow. He arrived at dawn, mist coiling above the slate doorstep, a box of still-warm rose shortbread in his hand. "Lee geez," he said, offering it. "The owner says you now prefer savory, less sugar." I stared. Even Julian hadn't noticed I'd lost my sweet tooth. A brocade cloak settled over my shoulders, sun-warmed. "Rain's forecast for the next few days," he murmured while tying the ribbon, careful not to touch my loose hair. "When you were 18 you caught a chill in the rain and your knees ached for 2 weeks." My head snapped up. That first visit to the Hawthorns I'd hidden in a side hall rubbing my knees, certain no one had seen. At midday he unfolded a fragment of the classic of tea, a slip fluttered from the brittle pages. "Use a purple hair brush to outline this page, Serena." A note I'd scribbled at 20 during my Palace Museum internship. I'd forgotten it entirely. "You dropped this in the conservation studio," he said, tracing the tear in the scroll. I kept it, thinking one day. My coughing cut him off. Next morning a jar of loquat paste waited on the sill. Beneath the white porcelain, "Dilute with warm water, don't cheat and eat it dry." My lifelong bad habit, one even Grandpa usually forgot. What stunned me most was the ginkgo sapling in the corner of the yard. As he planted it I blurted, "Why a ginkgo?" His shovel stilled, sweat trickled down his temple. "The first painting you ever did at the Hawthorns when you were 7. It was a ginkgo!" I exclaimed. That year I'd cried over the picture whipped away by wind. The butler had finally said the storm was too fierce, leave it. Turned out someone had chased it through half a street in the downpour. At dusk I finally asked, "Adrian, how many things about me do you actually remember?" Steam from the kettle blurred his outline. He lifted his eyes, softness like Willowmere rain inside them. "Starting the day you smashed your first inkstone at 5, his voice steady beneath the vapor, 23 years and 4 months ago. That night, bookmark pinched between my fingers, I watched his silhouette in the courtyard and realized. All these years he had stood behind me, watching me love someone else. I began avoiding Adrian. At dawn, while he pruned camellias with Grandpa, I hid in the study copying characters. At noon, when he helped Grandma brew tea, I slipped off to town for rice paper. On the 5th day he cornered me beside the stone bridge in the lane. "Serena." He held an indigo bamboo umbrella, rain slid along its ribs and pooled at his feet. "How long are you planning to hide?" I clutched my paper sack. "I'm not hiding." He gave a soft laugh, gaze dropping to my trembling fingers. "Liar." The downpour thickened. Adrian pulled me into the pavilion beneath the bridge. "You don't have to do this." He closed the umbrella, droplets spattering the slate. "I've kept my feelings buried for 5 years, another hour or day makes no difference." My head jerked up. His eyes stayed calm. "From the moment you restored Dongjing Menghua Lu at 18, I knew I was a lost cause." The drum of rain filled the air, my heartbeat sounded louder. When Julian started falling for Scarlett, I felt both joy and pain. He confessed. Joy because I finally had a chance, pain because I knew how heartbroken my Serena would be. Adrian told me he'd confronted Julian. I said, if you no longer love Serena, let her go. Julian had been polishing racing gear, not even looking up. You're imagining things, Scarlett's just a kid sister to me. Adrian stared at the lipstick on his collar and sneered, a sister? Would you forget Mr. and Mrs. Vance's Memorial Day for a sister? Julian hurled his helmet. None of your damn business. The rain eased, drips from the eaves struck the stone like small bells. The day you broke the engagement I was ecstatic. He said, stepping closer, hints of agarwood and cool rain wrapping around me. I know you still can't forget him, but I came to Willowmere anyway, to stay beside you. Serena, I'm selfish. His gaze burned into me, emotions surging like a burst dam. When you finally choose happiness, I want to be the first person you think of. Grandma's call drifted from afar, dinner was ready. I took a step back, putting space between us. Adrian. I said softly, give me a little time. He stood where he was, rain soaked his shoulders, yet his eyes were shockingly bright. All right, he smiled. I've already waited 5 years, what's a few more moments? Scarlett woke up. That night I received her WhatsApp. Sis Serena, look, the femme fatale outshines the first love after all. Julian sat by the hospital bed, his long fingers gently braiding her hair. I stared at the screen and remembered the year I turned 18, when Julian had clumsily woven my hair just like this and said, Serena, I'm claiming your hair for life. The next day another message arrived. The way he feeds me soup is so tender. In the photo Julian held a porcelain bowl, carefully blowing the steam away, while Scarlett flashed a victorious peace sign at the lens. I set my phone down and picked up the ancient book on the work table, resuming its conservation. Once, burning with fever, I had lain helpless while Julian combed every pharmacy at midnight, simmered ginger broth, and fed it to me spoon by spoon. On the third day the messages came again. We're getting engaged. This time it was a photo of the invitation, the gilded letters glared. Julian/Scarlett. Sis Serena, you absolutely must come. I stared at that line for a long while, then quietly closed the book. A flood of headlines followed. Hawthorne air crazy in love. Rents every billboard in the city. Scarlett's favorite femme fatale roses, Julian scours the city, fills a greenhouse. Exclusive, Julian designs engagement ring, 3 months in the making. I laid the newspaper aside, my fingertips unconsciously rubbed the faint circlet still etched on my left ring finger. Once, he had promised to design a ring for me with his own hands. Now it graced someone else's. I wore the white dress Julian had given me to his engagement banquet. He had hunted through half of Eastbrook to choose it for my 18th birthday coming of age. Serena, he'd said then, white suits you best, like Willowmere mist, pure and gentle. And today I wore it to watch him pledge his love to another. The ginkgo leaf hairpin in my bun was carved by Adrian himself. He had insisted I wear it, saying, ginkgo trees stay true for 1,000 years, perfect for you. When the ballroom doors opened, Scarlett's smile froze on her face. She probably hadn't expected me to come at all. Julian stood beside her, immaculate in his tux, yet the instant he saw me his fingers curled involuntarily. A reporter lifted a microphone. Mr. Hawthorne, why did you choose femme fatale roses for the engagement? Julian collected himself, voice hoarse. Because Scarlett is like a femme fatale, fiery, dazzling, impossible to ignore. As he spoke, his gaze flicked toward me. He used to say femme fatale roses were too vulgar, that I was like ginkgo, quiet, enduring. Congratulations. I stepped before them and offered the gift box with a smile. Scarlet eyed me warily, Julian's throat bobbed, and at last he murmured, "Jamie, aren't you going to open it?" I asked softly. Scarlet snatched it first, untied the ribbon. Inside lay a jade amulet. Julian's pupils contracted violently. It was the first birthday present he had ever given me. He was 10, had saved 3 months' allowance, all for the wish of peace year after year. "I still have things to do, I'll be going." I turned away. Behind me Scarlet's false plea rang out, "Sis Serena, stay a bit longer." I didn't look back, I simply lifted a hand in farewell, bidding goodbye to an old stretch of time. That night Julian's inbox received 2 files. The first contained every message and photo Scarlet had sent me in the past half year. See? He chose me. What's a first love? The femme fatale is the one he wants. Sis Serena, Julian likes me better in bed, hot as fire. The second held a private investigator's findings. Scarlet's car crash had been staged by herself. She had meant no more than a small accident to make Julian pity her, but she misjudged and nearly died. The last page of the file held a transcript of her call the night before the race. "Relax, I'll keep it under control, light injuries at most. He'll definitely pick me, and then Serena will be wiped from his heart. I've never failed to get what I want." Julian came the next day. He stood outside the canal-side cottage, drenched, eyes bloodshot, clutching the jade amulet. "Serena." His voice was raw. "I shouldn't have chased novelty, shouldn't have let Scarlet spin my head. I stood on the veranda, watching him in silence. The eyes that once made my heart race now held only panic and regret. "We're done, Julian." Adrian walked up from the back garden, a basket of freshly picked white tea in hand. Seeing Julian, he paused. Julian's eyes flared wide. "Adrian? What are you doing here?" His gaze ricocheted between us, understanding struck, and his face darkened. "It was you." He seized Adrian's collar. "You stole my girlfriend?" Adrian shoved him away coldly. "You already called off the engagement." Julian spun toward me, eyes scarlet. "A month? We broke up a month ago and you're with someone else? Or have you two been sneaking around behind me all along?" I stared at his twisted expression and felt only strangeness. "Julian," I cut in, voice trembling, "you make me sick." He froze. He hadn't been like this before. The Julian who knelt to tie my laces, who stayed up brewing soup, how had he turned into the snarling, suspicious stranger? Grandpa's carved cane slammed the floor. "Get out!" The old man's whiskers shook with fury. "No one mistreats a Vance granddaughter in my house." Grandma grabbed a broom and swept Julian toward the gate. "You promised us you'd treasure Serena for life." He staggered back, eyes still locked on me. "Serena, I didn't mean." The door slammed, shutting out his wretched figure. Julian was left outside. Through the crack I saw him slump to his knees in the rain, pounding the panel over and over. "Serena, I was wrong. I was out of my head." Rainwater mixed with his tears, but my heart no longer ached for him. Adrian gently covered my ears. "Don't listen." The day Scarlet came to Willowmere, she wore a scarlet gown and marched through the cottage gate in stilettos. "Serena! Have you no shame?" Her shrill voice shattered the courtyard's calm, a finger stabbed inches from my face. "Seducing another woman's fiancé, where's the Vance upbringing?" Julian burst in, yanked her away, voice like ice, "Get lost." Scarlet stumbled, disbelief flooding her eyes. You're telling me to get lost? The engagement is over. Julian enunciated every word. If you hadn't thrown yourself at me, Serena and I would never have broken up. Scarlett's face blanched, then contorted into a savage grin. Julian, want to dump me? Dream on. Suddenly she screamed, voice razor sharp, I'm pregnant. The whole Hawthorne family knows. The wedding is already being planned. Julian's pupils shrank to pinpricks. Impossible. Just then his phone rang. Theodore's voice rumbled through the speaker, authoritative and brooking no refusal. Come back and get married, now. Julian's knuckles bleached around the phone. Grandfather, I won't marry her. It's not your choice. Theodore barked. The Rowans aren't people you cross. You'll take responsibility. The call cut off. Julian stood frozen, face bloodless. Scarlett lifted her chin in triumph, scarlet nails brushing the slight swell of her belly. Hear that? You can't run. Julian jerked his head up, eyes shot with red. I'd rather die than marry you. The word snapped something inside her. She shrieked and lunged, raking his cheek until crimson furrows bloomed. Liar! You swore you'd take care of me. When he couldn't endure another second, he shoved her away. Ah! Scarlett crashed to the floor, curling around her stomach in agony. My baby, my baby. Julian stood paralyzed while Adrian already had paramedics on the line. Scarlett miscarried. Julian slumped against the wall, silent. From the hospital bed she screamed herself hoarse. Julian. You murdered my child. I hope you rot. In the end, the Hawthorne security detail hauled Julian back to Eastbrook. Before boarding the jet, he lingered outside the canal-side cottage and finally whispered, Serena, I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Julian still married Scarlett. The Hawthornes couldn't survive the scandal of a broken engagement, the Rowans couldn't stomach the disgrace of a miscarriage. The wedding was a spectacle, crimson roses carpeting the avenues, the bride radiant, the groom expressionless. Weeks later, Scarlett posted a diamond the size of a glacier atop mansion steps with the caption, Got exactly what I wanted. A month after that, Julian began keeping songbirds, each girl a trembling replica of 18-year-old Serena, gentle, quiet, fond of ivory silk kipeos. Scarlett uncovered the harem fast. She shattered his favorite Ming vase, ripped calligraphy scrolls to shreds, slapped one girl across a crowded restaurant. Julian watched her tantrum with cold eyes and said only, leave her alone. Soon Scarlett learned reprisal. She haunted nightclubs, flirted with every man in range, was even photographed slipping into a tycoon's penthouse at dawn. One night Julian walked in to find her and her lover half-naked tumbling out of the marital bedroom. They fought like wolves. Scarlett hit the floor, blood soaking the Persian rug. At the hospital, the doctor declared without inflection, miscarried. Julian laughed once, sharp and bitter. Wasn't mine anyway, good riddance. Scarlett screeched and clawed at his face. Julian, you animal. The spectacle ended with a single slap from him. I heard all this as gossip over brunch. Julian's wrecked, my friend giggled. Rowans are swallowing his shares, and he's being cuckolded on loop. She rattled on, but I tuned out. Yes, wrecked. After all, every docile little songbird had been placed by me. Each one, willow eyebrows, glacial poise, could make Julian remember the girl named Serena. Make him remember you. I told the girl who resembled me most. The deeper the memory, the sharper the blade when it twists. She nodded obediently, walked into the tea house he frequented, a ginkgo leaf hairpin sliding into her chignon, identical to the one 15-year-old Julian once gave me. The men circling Scarlett were also my selections. A fame-hungry painter, a rakish concert pianist, even a former Hawthorne rival. Mrs. Hawthorne craves thrill. I murmured to the private detective over tea. Let her drown in it. Soon Scarlett's hotel key cards outnumbered her lipsticks, anonymous photos mailed to the Ellis enraged Theodore so much he smashed his favorite Asian pot. Julian merely studied the images in silence and poured whiskey after whiskey. They wounded me. Did they think I wouldn't take revenge? I wore the white dress he gave me to our engagement party precisely so he would never forget. The sight of me walking away quiet, smiling my blessing. Remember that the happiness he should have owned was crushed by his own hand. Don't update me anymore. I cut my friend off. She blinked, startled by my sudden indifference. Outside the window, Adrian brewed tea beneath the ginkgo, steam curling. He glanced up and smiled. My anger is spent, I said, turning the porcelain cup. Whatever becomes of them is none of my business now. My friend hesitated, sighed, and left. Adrian stepped in and handed me an envelope. From Julian. I opened it, a single photograph. Julian at 18 and me under the ginkgo, him gazing at me like I was miracle enough. On the back, Serena, I deserve this. I smiled, tossed the photo into the brazion beneath the teapot. Flames leapt, devouring the last ember of adolescence. 2 years later, Ellis invitations flooded every mansion on the coast. I walked through the Hawthorne gates on Adrian's arm and the ballroom fell silent. Theodore sat at the head table, face thunderous, guests stared, eyes thick with scorn or calculation. Adrian let out a low laugh, pivoted, and guided me straight back out. Bastard! Theodore slammed the table. You stroll in and refuse to greet your own blood? Adrian didn't slow. If we're unwelcome, why linger? Step off that threshold and you're dead to this family. Theodore roared. Adrian paused, glanced back, smile thin. I already married into the Vance family. Gasps rippled through the hall. Outside, night air cooled my cheeks. I tugged Adrian's sleeve. When did you marry in? I wasn't informed. He looked down, eyes wicked. The day we wed I told your grandfather, our children will carry your surname. My ears burned, I turned away. Who says I'll have children with you? He chuckled, thumb brushing my ring finger where a band was etched with years of peace. Around the corner Julian stood in shadow, glass clenched, gaze welded to our linked hands. 2 years had carved hollows beneath his eyes, arrogance had withered to ash. Our eyes met. I looked past him without a ripple. Adrian felt my pause, followed my gaze, then tucked me closer and kissed my hair. Home? Yes. We walked away, shoulder to shoulder, never turning back.